بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Okay, so uh, he says نعم he says نعم استحباب التعوذ قبلها محله في من يقرأ خارج صلاة. آه وتحرم أي البسملة على المحرم وتكره على المكروه كما مر. Where is it? وكما مر. I don't know where you mentioned this before. Maybe right in the beginning. But when we say that it is when we say that it's haram for something that is haram and makruh for something that's makruh, أي لذاتهما, right? So we said you're turning on your car. Why are you turning on your car? I'm going to go and kill somebody. So sunnah to say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim when you turn on your car, because turning on your car is not haram, لذاته, right? As opposed to pulling the trigger when you're killing somebody. That's haram, right? Same thing, it's like makruh. Is it makruh in itself or is it not makruh in itself, right? So it'd be makruh to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim for something that is makruh in itself, or haram for something that's haram in itself. Okay. It says وغسل الكفين وهو أوضح من قوله اليدين. وذلك, right, so it's not sunnah to wash the yadain. You don't wash up to your elbows in the beginning of the wudu. You wash up to your wrists. وذلك للإتباع رواه الشيخان سواء تيقن طهرهما أم لا. Right, regardless, it's still recommended. So the recommendation of washing your hands before putting them in a bucket when you wake up in the morning is on the proviso that you are not certain that they're pure. So here in wudu, it is recommended even if you know that they're pure. So I just washed my hands right now, right? I was just rinsing something. My hands have just been, water's been going over my hand multiple times, and now I go make wudu. It is still sunnah to go and wash, right? Because it's a ritual. فإن شك في طهرهما كره غمسهما في ماء قليل قبل تثليث, right? So now if you're not sure, right, أي تردد فيه ولو مع رجحان الانتقاء, right, even if it's more likely. So the point is, the illah for the karaha of putting your hand in a bucket of water is a small body of water and you not having yaqeen. So that's shamil lidhan or a shak. I don't know if my hands are pure or not, or I think my hands are pure but I don't know, right? So it's still makruh. But if your hands are 100% pure, then it is not recommended. So we say when the Prophet ﷺ said, when you wake up in the morning, don't put your hand in the bucket of water until you wash it 3 times. فإنه لا يدري أين باتت يده, i.e., what if you did? The illah is لا يدري أين باتت يده. So if you do know where your hand spent the night, I have a camera on my hands and I washed my hands, then I went to sleep, and my here on my hands the whole night. I can see the video, right? There's no reason why the najas, nothing at all, right? Or somebody was watching me or whatever it is, right? So it's important to understand the default. The default is ahkam mu'allala, right? Well, all ahkam are mu'allala, right? Every single hukam has a reason. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't do things abathan for no reason. And the default is the illah is ma'rufa, right? And the default is that the hukm changes, right? Al-hukm yaduru ma'al illati wujudan wa adaman, right? The default is that there's a reason for something. We know what that reason is, and then when the reason is there, the hukm is there, and the reason is not there, it's not there. That's the default. The default is not that we're working in a world of mystery. That's not the default. Does that make sense? Like the default is like I'm working with Ammar, we work together. He's like, hey, don't do this because of this, and I know why he's saying the reason for what he's saying is this, so then it will change. He said, well, I did it anyway because it was different. He's like, yeah, yeah, I mean that's kind of understood, right? So the reasonableness of humans and the reasonableness of the Sharia is the same because the Sharia is Allah talking to humans. The issue is it does happen fairly frequently that we don't know why, right? Or it's a bit more complex, right? So here, it's like the Prophet ﷺ said, because you don't know where your hand spent the night, so we say, well, Ya Rasulullah, I do know where my hand spent the night. So therefore, I not have to do that, right? We don't say, oh, we just do it anyway, right? No, the Prophet ﷺ explained why we should do that, okay? So this is often the case in ibadat and in mu'amalat, the Prophet ﷺ explains why, there's a reason why, and that is the actual reason. If that reason is there, that's the hukm. If it's not, it's not. Simple as that. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? Just it's important concept to understand. Um, what about dirtiness that isn't necessarily najasa? Like, I think it's probably sound medical advice to wash your hands before washing your mouth. Nose having that is separate from being. That would be something else. So sound medical advice, that would be what's called we call it irshad, not istihbab, meaning it is from a worldly point of view, it's recommended, and from the point of view that it's good to sort out your worldly affairs, it's a good idea. Does that make sense? That's called irshad. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَكَاتِبُوهُمْ وَكَاتِبُوهُ إِنْ عَلِمْتُمْ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا, right? And do a mukataba contract with your slaves if you think they're good for you, meaning if you think you're going to make money out of it. That's how we understand it. It is not in itself recommended or obligatory to do a mukataba contract simply because a mukataba contract is a contract and contracts by default are not acts of worship. So it's recommended in principle to free your slave, but it's not recommended in principle to have him go and work and pay his by his freedom. So that's called irshad, right? A recommendation in the worldly thing. Does that make sense? So it's sometimes like that. Sometimes we will do ta'wil of a hadith to simply mean that, meaning the Prophet was or Allah was only talking to us from the worldly point of view. And we call that irshad, right? But that's rare. Okay. But achieving something like that, that would be good, right? But that's recommended from another point of view, right? And then new research comes along and says actually the opposite. Some it's accumulating some level of bacteria on your hand over the day, it helps your digestion, you know? So then they say actually don't do that. You're washing your hand too much. You know what I'm saying? Like that would change then based on medical understanding. You follow me, Amar?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. وهو أوضح من قوله اليدين وذلك الاتباع وراء. اوكي. فإن شك في طهرهما كره غمسهما في ماء قليل قبل تثليث لغسلها. وهو من زيادة وذلك لخبر مسلم إذا استيقظ أحدكم من نومه فلا يغمس يده في الإناء حتى يغسلها ثلاثا فإنه لا يدري أين باتت يده. أشار بما علل به right إلى احتمال نجاسة اليد في النوم كأن نقع على محل الاستنجاء بالحجر تقع it fell on right لأنهم كانوا يستنجون به فيحصل لهم التردد وألحق بالتردد بالنوم التردد بغيره. So is it relevant? So then the fuqaha, we look at sleep, is that relevant? And we say that is not relevant, right? It's not a relevant thing just because it just kharaja makhraj al-ghalib, right? It's just that's the normal thing people sleep at night, but what if they slept during the day? It doesn't make any difference. ولا تزول الكراهة إلا بغسلها ثلاثا. So you say it's offensive to do it if you're not certain. Okay, well if I wash my hands once, surely then it would know I would be certain that they're pure. So then how is it still offensive unless I do it three times, right? So he says ولا تزول الكراهة إلا بغسلها ثلاثا للخبر السابق. Notice, right? So those of you those of you who were in the um which class? The Usul class yesterday. We spoke about this, like to what extent can we cut up a text, right? So it's very easily arguable that you can say, well, if I just washed my hands a minute ago, it is not offensive for me to put my hands in the bucket, right? Yeah. Okay. So when I wash my hands once before putting it in the bucket, then it's no longer offensive, right? Say, no, 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 you have to do it 3 times. Say, hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. I went and washed my hands. I was doing washing up. I was washing my hands. My hands are definitely pure. I washed them once after I was washing, they had soap on them. I came and I was had the yaqeen that my hands were pure. So I don't, it's okay for me to put my hands in the bucket, right? Yes. It's not makruh for me to put my hands in the bucket, correct. However, if I'm mutaraddid, right? I don't have yaqeen, then I have to wash my hands 3 times before put them in the bucket. So yes, but if I did it once, I would be in the same category as the other person, right? So no, because of the khabar, right? So there's a difference. One is I know my hands are pure and I'm coming to put my hand in a bucket of water. Okay? The hukam is it's fine. Somebody who doesn't know, they do it 3 times. Okay, why? Al-Khabar says it, the hadith says it. There we go. Right. So there's some level of what's it called? There's different levels of how we use the text, right? And so I'm sure there's a position in the school probably, that exists that if you watched it once, it's no longer makruh, and then it just remains recommended otherwise, right? But the hadith says don't do it until you've done 3. So that means I've done 2. Also, some say don't do it until you've done 3. So if it says don't do it, that means it is don't means it's makruh, right? If not haram, the default is should be haram, right? So there's a number of things happening here, and then we see like to what extent we can edit a text, right? So let's compare this to don't commit zina. Okay, why? Oh, because you wouldn't know, you could spread disease, and you wouldn't know, whose child it was, and the child would grow up with nobody to support them and not knowing who their parents are, right? Is that the reason basically? Right? That's a normal person would say that's the reason, right?
That may be a reason, but
Exactly. So that's the problem, right? So I come along and say the reason is this. Okay. So I say the reason, two things: spread of disease and people being in situations where let's add other things. Let's just add some other utilitarian things like spread of disease, not knowing who your parents are, and a woman being in a situation where she can't work, right? Because she's pregnant and has nobody to support her, right? So let's and say pregnant plus looking after a baby. So let's say then, okay, so therefore, if I get rid of these 3 LL, right, I will make sure that this client came into this legalized brothel. May Allah protect us all, right? Here's a legalized brothel. This guy came in on this date, okay? He's known, she's known, identity is known, DNA is known. Fantastic, okay? Then she's already checked for diseases. He's already checked for diseases. Okay, so there's no issue of disease. There's no issue of who it is, right? And then there's a state law that applies that he has to support her for this whole time, right? So we say, why is it that I have to do a contract? Like why do you have to have a contract? Like, what's the fundamental difference then between a man marrying a woman Islamically, right, and then divorcing her sometime later, right? Versus that, like, what is it exactly? So the issue again, as Jawad mentions it, that's of the reasons. It's not so simple, right? But in principle, the concept is there. In principle, the whole idea is that yeah, like I'm not living in La La Land that like oh there's like I don't know why Allah tells us to do things. No, there's reasons, right? There's a reason why something's the case, and it could be A, B, or C, and this is what we do in usul fiqh, try and find out the reason and try and eliminate non-reasons, right? So zina is not haram because it affects the ozone layer, you know? That's not one of the reasons. But it is a bit more complex than that, right? And so sometimes A, we can't find it. B, um, you know, there's a whole list of reasons, and maybe you've eliminated two of them, but not all of them, right? But this is the general concept is there, right? Um, but it is a bit tricky how exactly we do this, right? Okay. It says ولا تزال الكراهة إلا بغسلها ثلاثة. So why do we say كراهة أصلا? Because again, الأصل اليقين, right? So we're saying it's not haram. The default it should be haram. The Prophet sometimes said don't do it, should be haram. But we say, well, it's because it's the default is your hands were clean. للخبر السابق وخرج بالقليل الكثير فلا يكره غمسها فيه, right? والمضمضة والاستنشاق للاتباع رواه الشيخان. وأما خبر تمضمضوا واستنشقوا فضعيف, right? That hadith is weak, right? Now here's the problem here. If the hadith is weak, can I not establish it? Can we not use it to prove that something is sunnah? Like if there was a weak hadith that said, when you make wudu, make sure you wash your mouth and nose. That we wouldn't use it to prove that it's sunnah to do it.
This is just a guess, but couldn't it be used as supporting evidence, but not as the actual
Yeah, and
reason
so
itself?
when we say supporting evidence, right? When we're talking about what's called fada'il a'mal, general ideas that we're familiar with, we will do that. So wudu is an idea that we're familiar with. We already know that there's some extra things here and there. So along comes a weak hadith that is not super weak, right? Super weak means it's just a mistake, right? Like it's shadh or it's munkar, it's mawdu', right? So shadh, Jawad mentions it, narrates it one way, everybody else narrates it another way. Clearly, Jawad just made a mistake. So it's just been basically proven wrong. Jawad to begin with is a bad narrator, and everyone else is narrating in another way. Jawad is known to lie, and he narrates a hadith that nobody else narrates, right? And the hadith sounds odd. Jawad says, I made this hadith up, right? So you're not going to act upon a hadith that is actually fabricated, right? So, so we will use weak hadiths in sunnahs all the time. We'll come to wiping the back of the neck in a second, right? So wiping the back of the neck in wudu. The debate is not whether or not the hadith is sahih. The question between Imam Rafi and Nawawi is how weak is the hadith, right? So we already the whole idea is al-ihtijaj bil hadith da'if is musallam. We're already using it as a proof. The question is it too weak to be used to prove or not? That's the question. Okay. So it says, so he says فضعيف, it's weak, right? ولو صح حمل على الندب, right? And if the hadith was sahih, right? And there is a hadith, other hadith, etc., that mention to do one's nose, etc. Um, a command to do it. So we say, why are we saying it's mandub then? What did the Prophet say to that man about wudu? ثم توضأ كما أمرك الله, right? So the Prophet told a man, he says, and then make wudu as Allah told you. And then make wudu as Allah told you. So what we're going to do, right, is any time there's any command or prohibition coming from the Prophet in respect to wudu, we're going to come back to the verse of the Quran and say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only mentioned these things, right? Not because we're Quraniyun, but because the Prophet ﷺ himself told somebody, just make wudu as described in the Quran. So therefore, any command to do anything else would be understood as a recommendation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So he says, وَأَقَلُّهُمَا ما آه. وأقلهما إيصال الماء إلى الأنف والنو... إلى الفم والأنف, right? You manage to get water to your mouth, water to your nose. That's considered you've done المضمضة والاستنشاق. ولا يشترط إدارته ومجه من الفم ونثره من الأنف. Right? ولا جذبه بالنفس إلى الخيشوم. Right? So to do the bare minimum, like if you said you made a vow, like I'm going to do shaq, as long as you put some water just slightly into your nostril and put some water in your mouth, even if you didn't gargle, even if you didn't wash it around, even if you didn't blow it out, that's fine. You've done the basics. That is what's called asl sunnah, right? That's a term we'll use. Well, asl sunnah kada. Like that's like the arkan of a sunnah. They call it asl sunnah, right? والمبالغة فيهما لمفطر right للأمر بهما في خبر الدولاب uh, right بأن يبلغ الماء في المضمضة أقصى الحنك. You try and get the water to the back of the throat. ووجهي الأسنان, to the two sides of the teeth. واللثات, to the gums, right? ويسن إمرار الإصبع عليهما, to pass the thing. So when you're doing it, to put your hands inside. ومج الماء فيه, في الاستنشاق, to get the water, uh, yeah, to get the water inside. And يصعد الماء, to get the water up. بالنفس إلى الخيشوم, into the nostrils. And he says وخرج بالمفطر الصائم, right? ولو متنفلا. So if you're doing fasting, even if it's sunnah fast, فلا تسن له المبالغة فيهما بل تكره. Right? So now if you are fasting, it is now it is now makruh, whether it's a sunnah fast or recommended fast, to do to it's not makruh to put water in your mouth or get water into your nose, but to do mubalagha is makruh, right? And because makruh, what we're going to say, and because karaha is part of the nahi, والنهي يقتل الفساد, we're going to say you accidentally inhaled the water, you accidentally swallowed the water by gargling excessively, you're going to break your fast, right? He says أي لخوف الإفطار ويؤخذ منه حرمتها على صائم آه على صائم فرد غلب على ظنه سبق الماء إلى جوفه, right? So I know that whenever I put water in my mouth, I always swallow it. If it's غلب الظن, it's become haram. ومحل الكراهة إن لم يكن بفمه نجاسة يريد غسلان Anyway, so then basically if you did that, it would break the fast because you've done something. Your accident, the accident that happened now, is لا يعتد به, is not considered, is not recognized. Right? That's what we mean by sahih and fasad. Valid, invalid, is it recognized by the Sharia, not recognized by the Sharia? So your excuse for accidentally swallowing water now is not recognized because you were told not to do it. Even though it wasn't haram, the point is you did something you were not supposed to do, so now you don't have an excuse. Okay, so then going back, he says, للأمر بها في خبر الدولاب. So we have a bit of a problem in the Shafi school, is that um, so here when he says Ad-Dulabi, I don't think that our author was reading Ad-Dulabi. I think Ad-Dulabi's book is called um, it's called something like Al-Asma wal-Kuna or something like that, Al-Kuna of Ad-Dulabi, right? So it's a book on strange narrators' names and what's going on. And in it, he mentions certain things here and there. Right, Allahu Alam. You can just quickly look him up, Ad-Dulabi. He is, I think, 4th or 5th century scholar, Ad-Dulabi, al-Muhaddith, right? So the issue is like, how is like the proof for this to be recommended is a hadith in Dulabi. Like that's really weird. Right? Here it's called Al-Dulabi fil Kuna wal Asma. I'm just going to bring him up here quickly. Mahalli will mention him as well. So Zakaria Ansari's teacher will mention Dulabi as well, right? But I don't think like Imam Nawawi will mention a Dulabi. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think it's going to be just like odd. Like how is that? How is that your dalil? So here, if this is a Dulabi, just quickly going over him. Um, ولدت في سنة 24 و200. Oh, he's not that. He's not. I'm pretty sure this is the Dulabi then. ولدت في سنة 24 و200. No, he's not that late. I thought he was in like fourth, fifth century. He's not. Um, but the issue is like there's a hadith, a hadith in this book, it just sounds a bit odd. It doesn't really mention anything about his book. Uh, so Ibn Hibban narrates from him. And that's about it. Doesn't really say that much about him. So it's just very odd that the Dalil should be a hadith in Ad-Dulabi. This is very odd, right? Like, so what it probably is, if you look at someone like someone somewhere else, they're probably going to mention that there's either qiyas, right? Either qiyas or something from the Sahaba, right? So what's the hukm right now? We can just do a little exercise. I'm not going to. So it mentions here. So it's recommended to do mubalagha because it's in the khabar of Dulabi, right? I don't think it's only in Dulabi. That's like everywhere. So that hadith illa saim, I'm pretty sure is well known. When we go to Shamila, okay, and I'm going to go to uh illa lis-saim. I think it says illa lis-saim. I think that's how the hadith goes. Illa lis-saim. Okay, and I'm going to look in. So it comes out in the hijama. Uh, إلا أن تكونوا صائما, something like that. بالغ. What's the word? بالغ. صائما. Here we go. وبالغ في الاستنشاق. Here we go. Let's find this. That's the one. بالغ في الاستنشاق. Look here, it's in Ibn Majah. It's in Abu Dawood. It's in Tirmidhi. Can you see the issue there? Like that's a problem in doing takhrij. If somebody did takhrij like that, here we go. So it's in Abu Dawood. في الاستنشاق إلا أن تكون سنن أبي داود. Okay, it's in Abu Dawood. So So here, look, we see the Tahrir. Sheikh Shu'aib is going to give us the whole Tahrir here. So here, this hadith. Oh, great. He said he already did Tahrir previously. So it's 14142. Where's 142? Can't find 142. It's odd. Hadith 142.
There's the box at the top you can put in the raqam.
Say it again, sorry?
There's the box at the top you can put in the raqam, I think, on the left side.
Oh, here. Yeah. Hello.
You have to do it in English.
Yeah, of course. Post colonialism, right? Can't look at your own hadith without doing our system. What did it was it something else that I wasn't it just 142? Uh, hmm. Spot on. Okay, let's just look here anyway. تخريج المشكات بالغ في الاستنشاق. Okay, anyway. Okay. Here's here. So بالغ في الاستنشاق إلا أن تكون صائما. أبو داود ترمذي, right? Nasa'i in the Kubra and Qazwini. So why would you mention Dulabi, you know? So you mentioned Dulabi because somebody else mentioned Dulabi. That's why you do it. So that wouldn't be like today, if you were doing a master's or PhD thesis, right, at some university, one of the basic things you're going to be doing, obviously you can just research these things, is doing takhrij like this. Like, here's a hadith, quote the source. You do not quote Dulabi. That's not a source. Like, I mean, that's a really random source that like nobody uses, right? It was like, I don't know. So the point is, it's in Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi, you can say. كما رواه أبو داود والترمذي وغيرهما, something like that. Does that make sense? So again, why would our author be doing that? Because he is not a hadith scholar par excellence, A, and B, because people are just copying previous texts. So Imam Ghazali, they say, why does Ihya al-Ulumuddin have so many random hadiths? Right? Because Imam Ghazali is not a hadith scholar. He tells us I'm not a hadith scholar. It's quite hard to be a hadith scholar because you have to go through all of these books and find all these hadiths and all these different things. And yeah, I'm just quoting from other sources and that's it. And I didn't know. I trusted other sources. I didn't know they had random hadith in them. I'm sorry. Right? So that kind of thing happens. Baydawi as well. Baydawi, I think, has fabricated hadith in it, right? Tafsir al-Baydawi. They're just quoting somebody who fabricated hadiths. So that has nothing to do with Baydawi itself. It's just, that makes sense. Am I making sense to everybody?
Yes.
Right. So we just want to know what these people are doing. That's all. Right. So, Khabar ad-Dulabi. Right. خير. بأن يبلغ ويبلغ الماء we did that. وجمعهما بثلاث غرف, right? To do the two of them gathered together in three scoops. يتمضمض ثم يستنشق من كل ثلاثا للإتباع. رواه الشيخان. وهذا أفضل من الجمع بينهما بغرفة يتمضمض بها ثلاثا ثم يستنشق منها ثلاثا، أو يتمضمض منها ثم يستنشق مرة ثم كذلك ثانية وثالثة. Right? So he says basically these three different ways of doing the mouth and nose. So the first is what? So جمعهما بثلاث غرف. So do mouth and nose. Mouth and nose once, and then mouth and nose once, and then mouth and nose. You do 3 scoops doing the mouth and nose, right? That's the recommended. رواه الشيخان. هذا أفضل من الجمع بينهما بغرفة. غرفة is 1 scoop. غرفة is a little room. So you can call it a غرفة because you made a little room out of your hand, or you can call it غرفة. Both comes in the Quran. إلا من اغترف غرفة بيده إلا من اغترف غرفة بيده. You can say both. مطمئن. So what's the second one? من يجمع بينهم بغرفة واحدة منها ثلاثا ثم يستنشق ثلاثة. Oh, so you do you do 3 scoops for the mouth and then 3 scoops for the nose. أو يتمضمض منها. Or we do mouth, nose, mouth, nose, mouth, nose. Right? So those are those 3 options. والأفضل من الفصل بينهما. What did it say? بست غرف. Huh? She's kind of going into levels in between this. I'm just trying to understand this. This is والأفضل من الفصل بينهما. Better than separating them with 6 scoops, doing his mouth 3 times and then his nose 3 times. Right. Oh, with 2 scoops. Or doing 2 scoops, doing your mouth with the first 3 times and then the nose with the second 3 times. Yeah. You're just mentioning variables of levels of the sunnah, but basically, as mentioned, it's better to do 3 scoops, mouth and nose in one go. Right? والاستنثار. الاستنثار, this is a separate sunnah, which is to get stuff out. Right? لخبر مسلم ما منكم من أحد يتم يتمضمض ثم يستنشق فيستنثر, to get the things out of your nose. إلا خرت خطايا وجهه وخياشيمه. Right? So you're actually physically getting off. We spoke about this before. You're physically getting off sins. That's the important thing. Right? So when you make wudu, physically the sins are coming off. Right? It's important to understand that. Right? So obviously there's spiritual sides to things, right? So you have to understand we live in 3 worlds. Okay, there's like 3 worlds that we live in. Okay. We do have to be cognizant of the 3 worlds we live in and appreciate them, right? So let's go into let's look at 2 worlds. Like there's the world of the Jabarut and the world of the Mulk. Okay? The world of the Jabarut is everything is kun fayakun. You don't have any effect. There's no cause event effect. There's just Allah saying be and it is. That's it. So it's very important to be in that world and to experience that world because that's the real world. Right? The world is Allah is making things happen. And that's it. And you can't harm me and you can't benefit me and you can't impress me. You're not impressed by anything. The person who lives in that world is not impressed by anything. He doesn't long for anything of this thing because it's kind of like he sees there's 2 worlds. There's the world of Allah and then there's a world of just like other than Allah. And other than Allah is not that impressive compared to Allah, right? And that being in that world, you feel like everything makes sense. Being in that world, you can be generous because everything is just being is. You're not worrying about things. You're not trying to achieve this, achieve that. There's like pure taslim to the jabarut of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Absolute total dominion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's a world to be in. The opposite world is the world of the mulk, where I pick up my phone, I drop it, pick up the phone, drop it, pick up the phone, drop it. Eventually it breaks. Say, bro, don't break your phone, right? You live in this world where, well, you applied for the job and you had a better resume, so you got the job. Like that's how it works, right? The world where even if you have a good intention, you could offend people, right? So in the world of the Jabarut, offending somebody is not caused by you, right? So the person who lives in the Jabarut, like he could be like a good Mr. Bean, if that makes sense, you know? Like you could just be a real weirdo, and it's like you don't actually achieve any good in the world, but it's fine because it's just in Allah's hand and it's okay, right? That's why people who are totally in the Jabarut and not in the Mulk at all, they're called Majdub, right? They're called somebody who's pulled to the side because they're kind of basically insane. They're not really insane in that sense, but they're insane in the sense that they are not more responsible. They're not actually able to do good or bad deeds anymore, but they're just in this world of like total absorbed in kun fayakun, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may use them for certain good things in this world or may not, right? But you're not actually very useful. You can't do anything, right? If you imagine going into jihad while you're in the Jabarut world, like you're just there and you're like, Allah is making me exist. Allah is making the kuffar come. Allah is like, all right. And like, well, what are you doing? Like, you're not doing anything because you're just like dumbstruck by Allah's total omnipotence and how there's no actual fight. It's just be and it is. And then you have the other world, which is like, I'm being shot at. Why am I being shot at? What's going on? And then maybe if I swear, it'll be like this. Maybe like halal and haram doesn't really like it's not very relevant in the mulk because it's just physical things, right? Physical cause and effect, normal cause and effect of politics, of emotions, etc. Right? So you have these two opposing worlds. And then you have the middle world, which is the malakut. The malakut is a world of, well, if I have a good intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put barakah in things. If I say Bismillah, there'll be barakah in it. And when I wash my eyes, the sins come off. So you're now in this kind of like magical world, which is in between, where good deeds and bad deeds have effects, right? And there's angels and the shayateen, right? That's the world of the malakut. So in reality, we have to live in these three worlds, right? In reality, we have to live in these three worlds, right? And you actually live in them in tandem, right? You live in them in tandem. Just like at work, you live in a social and economic and political and I don't know what else system at the same time. Like when you're sitting next to somebody, there is an economic relationship, there is a social relationship, there's a this. There's actually lots of different worlds that come. There's lots of things that are happening. But so for the in the mind for the mind and the experience of the believer, there's these three worlds, right? So you will work hard in the dunya, make dua in your so in the dunya you work hard, in the malakut you make dua, and in the jabarut you rely on Allah. Does that make sense? Because it's all just Allah. But that's three different worlds. Work hard in the dunya because right, and in the malakut you make dua because dua has cause event effect in that world, and you rely on Allah because in the malakut in the reality there's no cause event effect, right? So we have to merge these two worlds, but reminding ourselves of the middle world is really important, right? So like if you look at there's a lot of people today who are outwardly kuffar and outwardly materialists. They're not actually at all. They're super into the occult, right? It's like super into the occult. The occult is a big thing. It's not a small thing at all, right? It's very, very big for Jews. It's very, very big with many people, right? You see a lot of things who like, why did this war happen on this day? Because the stars were aligned, right? And they'll like check these things, or will they announce this on this day, or they do this. Like it's a lot of these things. The occult is big, and so when you see the occult, you're like, hey, it helps you like, oh man, these people are playing with systems that are actually sometimes real, right? Like astrology, right? There's reality in it, or star signs and all these different things, right? There's reality in it, right? And magic, there's reality, but that's not the systems we use. That's a realm that's not the realm of the mulk. That's a realm of the malakut. And there's systems in the malakut that we use and systems in the malakut we do not use, right? Does that make sense? But when you see it, you're like, oh man, that just helps your yaqeen that there is such thing as a malakut. There is such thing as a world where, like, if you do a good deed, it is like a positive atomic bomb. And when you do a bad deed, it's like a negative atomic bomb. Like things are happening. Like things are actually happening. Like you say Bismillah and you open the door. It's actually a different door. It's like a different realm. Does that make sense? So it's actually kind of useful. I know most of you here that have kids, but or Musa, inshallah, have kids soon. But like, sometimes like when you're watching a cartoon or a film with like magic in it, it actually quite kind of helps kids understand this malakut because like, oh, there's something other than physical, you know? And there are peoples in the world who only live in a made-up malakut, right? Like they have I was reading recently Freud's totem and taboo, right? Totem and taboo. So they have these like totem things, like the world is controlled by the animal that my tribe worships, and if that animal dies, I will die with him. And if the animal is seen on the cliff, that means we all have to travel north. And if he's seen down next to the river, that means we all have to travel south. Like there's a connection. There's actually totally, it doesn't make any sense. But there are real things. So like magic is real. The evil eye is real. Dua is real. Saying Bismillah is real. Washing your face with wudu is real, right? Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, there's a weak position from him that ma musta'mal is najas, right? And it said that he saw the filth coming off. Like he saw the sins coming off. It's like, whoa. It's like so you can imagine seeing filth coming off your body and then saying, oh, it's najas, right? So it is najas in the sense that like you don't drink ma musta'mal. You shouldn't do that, right? Because it's not something that's good, right? As zakah, for example, you don't want to receive zakah, right? The Prophet said zakah is just the filth of people, right? When people give zakat, they're literally purifying. It's like they're getting rid. It's their waste, right? You don't want to receive zakat because it's not in principle good. I mean, you obviously if you have no choice, but does it make sense? Like, so there's actually something physically happening when you recite the Quran. There's an angel taking the Quran from your mouth, right? Like physically there, right? So the idea that it's not just a symbol that we've made up, right? Like a handshake is a symbol that we've made up. In another culture, they do something else. These are the flags that we have, the logos that have. These are the hand gestures. These are just something made up. It's just fake that we have made up, and only has value in as much as it's lasted. But these are not symbols. These are real, like real physical things are happening in another realm when you do this, when you eat with your right hand, when you say Bismillah, when you have a good intention, the reality changes. When you make dua, the reality changes, right? So, you're having an argument with somebody and the person's really not understanding you. You got to be in those three realms. You don't just say, I'll just go and sujood. Like, how is he going to solve that problem? Like the guy's like really upset. Like you have to talk and you have to use convincing methods, and you can't just be like Allah, and he's going to be like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, so you need to be in the mulk, this world. Your feet are on this ground, and your feet are also in the malakut. I'm going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then my feet are also in the jabarut, meaning I see with my heart, cause, event, effect is all coming from Allah. Go ahead, Musa.
Yeah, sorry to interject, but yeah, it definitely does. If I may interject, yeah, these three different realms definitely do exist. Like the idea of like Sahid is like very prevalent amongst the Hispanic communities, and yeah, for a lot of actually converts, it's the experience with the Sahir that allows them to know that like, oh, actually, this whole like dichotomy of good and evil actually does exist. Like Allah must be real because Shaitan is real.
Yeah,
So it's very very interesting. SubhanAllah.
yeah. Yeah. Jazakum khair. And so, subhanAllah, sometimes again these kuffar have more yaqeen than we do. Like there was this. I'm sure so you might have heard this. Maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, was this student asking a rabbi like, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how do you pronounce it? Yeshoi? Something like that. How do you pronounce him? Does God, so I don't know how they say it. Yeshoyim or something like that. They have a word. It's not Yahweh, it's another word they use. Does he answer the prayers of the children of Ishmael, right? Or the Arabim, they call them, right? The Arabs. So they see it as a tribal thing, right? It's like the sons of one of one brother and the sons of another brother, right? They see it in kind of a racist, kind of weird way, and something kind of odd like that. So then so the question was put to this rabbi, like, when the Arabs make dua against us, um, does God like hear their prayer? The answer was yes, right? And then he mentioned things that, for example, affect that prayer. The fact that they do something which is called modesty. They had a word for it, modesty. They observe some kind of thing, right? And they said, yeah, the fact that, for example, their women are more modest than us, the fact that they observe circumcision, the fact that they observe halal and haram food, like that's actually real. So this rabbi is saying it's real. So like basically we need to now to find other spiritual weapons against them. Like they have spiritual weapons against us. We need to use other spiritual weapons against them, right? So it's like ajib, it's like really, really weird. Like, so you could imagine the shaitan, like the shaitan is like looking at you, like, don't use that weapon, don't use that weapon, don't use that weapon. And you start pull out Ayatul Kursi on him. Like he knows Ayatul Kursi, he has more knowledge of the effectiveness of Ayatul Kursi than us, right? Uh, was it Ayatul Kursi that when the Prophet said Sadaq al-Khabith, right? When the man was looking after the zakat and charity, and some of it kept disappearing. And then he found this weird being there who had like really weird arms for that, and he managed to like fight him or push him away. And and then when he's pushing him away, this weird being says, "You know what? There's one thing that you could have done, and I couldn't have had any control over any of these things." And it was like Bismillah, or I think it was Ayatul Kursi, right? And so then the man was like shocked, like this weird being was like accessing the charity or zakat, and he's telling me like you could have protected your property from this by saying this dua, by saying this dhikr. And then he goes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet says, yeah, sadaq al-khabith. Maybe somebody can look it up, sadaq al-khabith. Like that the filth, that filthy man spoke the truth. Like they actually know, right? They know the effectiveness of what you're doing, right? They know the effectiveness of women dressing properly. That's why they want you to take your clothes off, right? Like this is a huge agenda, really important agenda. I have friends in Palestine. They said they'll literally pay people to do that. They will pay women to take the hijab off because they know what effect it has, right? Yeah. But the thing is with these people, with people involved in magic, people involved in Satanism, Shaitan himself, with the Jews, like they're looking at us and they're seeing the effect of what we do in the Malakut. Like it's actually real, right? Because they're working in that world. They're probably connected with Shayateen, right? They're probably connected with Shayateen, all sorts of Shayateen. And the Shayateen are telling them, make sure they don't say these words. Make sure that they, focus on this. Make sure they don't do this. Make sure they don't do that, right? Um, so it's pretty important, right? But at the same time, here's a problem. Here's a problem then with Muslims is now let's just treat the deen as good magic, okay? So I'm just going to sit here and repeat and just do, good magic. So Kaf, I don't know what it says, but I'm going to do it every Friday because it protects us from the Dajjal. And Surah Yasin, I don't know what it says, but it's a good thing for debt. I'll go and do it at the graveyard, right? Qul huwallahu ahad, just do it a million times, right? It's a good thing to do, right? Salat to the Prophet sallallahu etc. That's fine. Obviously, there's tremendous benefit in it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, so that they should reflect, right? So it's supposed to be, Musa, go and tell your wife, I'm sorry 1,000 times. So he says, I'm really, really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. And then he's like, by the 10th time, he's like, yeah, I feel really bad now. Like it's changing him, And then he's like, yeah. So now there's supposed to be that he said, I'm really, really sorry. And then it changed the way he spoke to her, right? And then there's a difference in the interaction, Say, for example, I'm sorry and I really value our relationship, right? He said something. As opposed now he treats it as a magic. It's like, blah, 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 and it's like, it doesn't come out in the way he interacts with her. So like, what was the point? I mean, obviously it's better than saying something else, but it's kind of pointless, right? to some extent. So the Quran is supposed to be doing two things. It is supposed to be in the mulk, in the way that we interact things, like there's a word, the word has a meaning. You're supposed to think about the meaning and think about what you're supposed to do. So this person who is only in the malakut, they just treat it as like seher, right? And so like you'll find that Orientalists, they will say that. They say like, Muslims, the Muslimans, the Musliman, the Mohammedans only read the scripture as a form of magic. Like they see it as magic. Like they just do it for like its spiritual weird benefits, but they don't actually think about what it says. They're never actually reading it to apply it in their life. That's not a thing that they do, right? And so it's a reality, right? It's a reality. So it's both. There's a third, a other dimension effect of these sounds, right? Positive and good sounds, all these things. The riba has a negative effect in this realm, but then in this realm, it means something as well, right? So you need to be in both worlds, right? And we don't just say, oh, we just do this for that reason. There's a meaning, right? Meaning in things, right? When you give salams to people, but they don't have salamat al-sadr, you're not actually, in your heart, you actually have a grudge against them. You have issues against people. It's not real, right? It's not. So what are you doing? Right? And then ikhlas is this huge thing, right? The Prophet ﷺ, mentioned the hadith Qudsi, like ikhlas. What is ikhlas? So the angels that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth, right? And they created, what was it? I think it says, it was mountains, I think it was first. So it said, yeah, Allah, is anything stronger than mountains? And they said, yes. So what is it? Iron. Okay. So is there anything that's stronger than iron? So yes, fire. Okay. Is there anything that's stronger than fire? So yes, water. Is there anything stronger than water? Says yes, wind. Is there anything stronger than wind? So yes, the sincerity of a slave who gives charity and he hides it so much that his left hand doesn't know what he's giving, right? So if that's the hadith, somebody can remind me correctly, right? So yeah, so it's like so so ikhlas is a real thing, right? It's like a real physical thing. That's what it is, right? So yeah, so Baqarah is like, no, I have no problem. So number one, playing Baqarah and a loop is not reciting Baqarah in reality. So that's another problem. It's another thing that we've got today is playing Baqarah is not reciting. No one's reciting Baqarah. So it's better for somebody to do a broken, botched job, Ayat al-Kursi from what they remember from school, than for somebody to play Baqarah. Because actually, when you play Surah Baqarah, nobody's reciting. There's nobody reciting that. Like you don't do sujood sahw. You don't do sujood tilawa for a recording because nobody's doing anything. So it's not a bad thing because it reminds you and it sets a start. That's fine, but no one's actually doing anything, right? So the recording is a way, also a trick of the shaitan. Like I don't want you to do anything. Let the machine do it, right? That's like having an app that prays for you, or an app that takes your kids out. You have a robot that picks your kids up from school, ask how their day was. It's like, no, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to bond with your kids, right? So you're supposed to bond with the Quran, right? So, so it should be, so loop is fine. Like we just recite it, but we should stop and say, what does it mean? And they're like, I don't know. Well, that's important because Allah is telling you something, right? So it should be like this. It should be like, right? فَلَا تَخْشَوْنِي وَخْشَوْنِي. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not dread them, dread me. Boom. Hit by a tidal wave. I was intimidated by my boss. I was scared that they're going to find me. I was worried about this. Allah's like saying, don't fear them. وَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ. Do not fear them. Only me. Fear me. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to us in very firm terms. Don't be scared of anything other than Allah. So it should be this tidal wave that hits you. You put the book down and you're like, wow, what does this mean to me? Right? What does this mean to me? What do I have to do? And so there has to be this combination. Okay, we read it, but there has to be this thing like it's telling me something. Open the Mus'haf, it's telling you something, it's talking to you. There's actually right. It's not just, this is a mystery, right? So there's things that are mysteries, kaf, ha, ya, ain, sad. I don't know what that means, okay? But there's other things that are like, No, it's telling you to do something, right? Let's look at Surah Maryam, like how does that apply in my family? Why is it that all of these people are connected? And what is it about their family that will make them guided, right? How can I change? So there has to be change. Like you open the Mus'haf, how can I change, oh Allah, right? A willingness to change as opposed to this is a cool ritual. It's going to help me on Judgment Day. Of course, it's a cool ritual. It's going to, a ritual that's going to help you in the dunya and the akhirah. But that's not the only thing that it's there for, and that's not the main thing that it's there for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Um, okay. والاستنثار لخبر. So the point is that خرج ويحصل ذلك بأن يخرج بعد الاستنشاق ما في أنفه من ماء وأذى, right? Disgusting things. ويسن ذلك بإصبعه اليسرى. You do not wipe your hand, wipe your nose, or your private parts with your right hand. You wipe your nose, private parts with your left hand. ومسح كل الرأس للإتباع رواه الشيخان والسنة والسنة في كيفية مسحه أن يضع يديه على مقدمه أي رأس ويلصق مسبحته بالأخرى وإبهاميه على صدغيه ثم يذهب بهما إلى قفاه. So you get your thumb on your temple, just above your ears, the point of your thumb over your temple, connect your two index fingers, right? And then you make this ring around the front of your head, and then you push that ring all the way back to your qafa, all the way back to the end of where the hair is, right? So the Malikis, for them, the qafa is part of the rats. You have to do that, right? So you go all the way to the back. Right? ثم يردهما إلى المبدأ, and then you go to the back. So you're going to go back, you're going to go back and then forward, and then back and then forward, and then back and forward 3 times in our school, right? And so this is of the afrad of the Shafi school, is that we do it 3 times. The other schools do not do it 3 times, right? ثم يردهما إلى المبدأ إن كان له شعر ينقلب. If your hair flicks, meaning it is short enough to flick. So that if it's too short to flick back, right? Or if it's too long to flick back, like a woman with long hair, you just do it once back or to the back, that's all. وإلا فليقتصر على الذهاب. فإن لم يرد نزع ما على رأسه من عمامة أو غيرها مسح ما يجب من الرأس وتمم على ما عليه. So you're going to do, if you don't want to take your hijab off, push your, she takes does a bit of the top of the head and then wipes over the rest of the hijab, or you have a turban or something like that. Okay. ومسح الأذن. Have we got to? I don't think we've got to. I think we have to finish the sunnah and we can go back to the matan, I believe, right? ومسح الأذنين ظاهرا وباطنا بماء جديد. Right, taking new water. Right. So okay. Um okay, so you get new water, you rinse your fingers. So then we do our what was it? So with the ears are done 15 times in total. So we do the ears when you're doing your face. You're washing your face, you wipe over your ears. Okay, so 3 times. Okay, then you're doing your head, you wipe over the top of the ears. So that's 6 times. And then you get water with your index fingers and thumbs. You put your thumb behind your ear and you put an index finger in your ear and you work through the grooves of the ear. And you do that. One new water, two new water, three new water. So now that's 9. Okay? And then we get your index finger or your pinky. Okay? There's different, you find them mentioning different things. And you wet that, and then you just do the just the opening of the ear. And then you wipe your hands, and then you just with an open hand, just wipe over your hand. Just with an open hand, just wipe over your ears like that three times. So that's a total of 15. Okay. So it says ومسح الأذنين ظاهرا وباطنا بماء جديد لا ببلل الرأس. لا ببلل الرأس. So it says here تفسير لكون فكان أولى أن يأتي ب وكان أن يأتي ب something be I think the word is A. You should have the word A, which means IE. Right. والمراد لا ببلله في المرة الأولى. وأما في الثانية والثالثة فهو طهور فيحصل السنة مسح رأس به. أما كماله فلا يحصل. ولو أخذ بإصبعه ماء لرأسه فمسح بعضه بعض أو باقي الأذن كفى لأنه ماء جديد. So the issue is taking water that you've already used, right? So is it going to be new water or not? Istiqlal, I don't know what that's called. So istithar is that one where you have the open hands. That's called istithar. But I don't know istiqlal. I'm not sure. So the issue is basically, if you used water from your head to do your ears, then you have not done the sunnah of doing your ears. That's the point. لا ببل الرأس للاتباع رواه البيهقي والحاكم وصححاه. Right? So usually we do it the other round. رواه الحاكم والبيهقي. Right? So Bayhaqi is a student of Al-Hakim. Hakim is a student of Ibn Hibban. Okay? So it could well be that it's a same hadith. Right? It's just Bayhaqi narrating from Hakim. Right? Wallahu a'lam. And again, when he says Hakim wa sahahahu, the point he's trying to say is that it's sahih, right? Because the default of Mustadrak Hakim should be sahih. Is it actually the case? Wallahu a'lam. So are these is is it actually sahih? Allahu a'lam, right? But again, it doesn't really matter if it's sahih or not, right? And here it says musabbihatayhi, using your index fingers, right? Oh no, that's what I mentioned. That was what I mentioned, right? Index fingers in the middle with the thumbs on the back of the ears, yeah. ويمر إبهاميه على ظهور. ظهور is actually butun. So that the part of the ear that is touching your head, that's called ظهور, the ظاهر. Right? He says here, وَالظَّاهِرْ مَلْيَ لِلرَّأْس. What's next to the head? Right? So you can imagine like a donkey or a cat. Like if you look down at the cat's ears, you can't see the inside of the ear. Right? You see the outside of the ears. That's called the ظاهر. ثم يلصق كفيه. Huh? ثم يلصق كفيه something. What's this word here? I don't know what this word is here. I don't know if anybody else has something else.
I have وهما مبلولتان.
Oh, maybe I'm missing a page again. No, not.
I think this is a different section. I think it's a little bit lower. There's a line separating
So
it.
here it says ويلصق. Oh, I see. وهما مبلونتان بالأذنان استظهارا. That's the istithar. وذكرت في شرح الأصل زيادة على ذلك. Right? And who is it? Where's the other brother? What was the other brother's name what is his name now? You had found he had found the asl? He had found the original commentary on an Iraqi's Tanqih. Can't cover his name now. He was here last week. Anyway, we can have a look there, what the asl is. Okay. He says, وَتَخْلِيل شَعْرٍ كَثِيثٍ. She does not mention more than that, right? So key concept, there are main sunnahs and there are infinite small sunnahs, okay? So when I mentioned the 15 different ways of doing your ears, a lot of these things are minor sunnahs, right? Are like sunnahs are like, yeah, I mean, it's either based on a weak hadith, super weak hadith, based on another interpretation, which would be marginally a better idea. So there's when you say sunnah, there's a whole spectrum, right? Like sunnah could be well established, arguably obligatory, but not obligatory, sunnah. And then definitely not obligatory, but well established. And then well established, kind of good. And then marginally superior. You know what I'm saying? Like something is marginally superior, which means it's also recommended. So when you say sunnah, we mean the whole category. And not every sunnah is super important, right? Not every sunnah is super important. The most important sunnahs are sunnahs that are arguably obligatory or makruh not to leave, right? And so generally in life, you know, if you look at your life, all of us were very busy people, right? There's lots of things you can do. So the shaitan likes us to do infinite things. So what you should do, number one, is have a system of things that you can do. Like this is the sunnahs that I do. These are what I can actually achieve in my life, right? That's number one. And then you stick to it and you never change. That's a really, really important thing, right? Like if you never change, like you always do this, it's really important. So that protects you from being, showing off and doing more in certain presence of certain people, stops you from the shaitan doing these things. But it's also important that you prioritize avoiding the haram and avoiding makruh. So if you look at your life, right? So let's take Jawad, okay? He looks at his daily schedule. He's actually very busy, okay? He has 50,000 gazillion things to do. And so the way he works is, I actually can't do everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to avoid the haram. That's number one, okay? And importantly for unmarried people is making money to avoid the haram, right? I want to get married because it's not very happy being unmarried for most people, right? Not a very safe situation. Anyway, so that's something else. But let's say that is, I want to avoid the haram, right? Avoiding the haram is not as easy as we imagine, right? We label ourselves as religious people, but then actually, if you actually have a critical view of your life, there's actually certain things here and certain things there. Oh, and that happened, but that's an exception. And this is an exception. In reality, there's actually a lot of haram in a lot of people's lives. So you say, my life, I want to do the following: avoid the haram. Number one. Number two, avoid the makruh. Okay? So if you have a life where you avoid the haram and you avoid the makruh, and B, you don't waste time, then you're doing fantastic. Like if your life is full of avoiding the haram, avoiding the makruh, and not wasting time, then you're doing fantastic. But now let's think about the other paradigm. The other paradigm is let's do every single sunnah possible. Who is telling you to do every single sunnah possible? The shaitan. Why does he want you to do that? Because he wants you to continually change, right? And he doesn't want you to focus on avoiding the haram and makruh, right? So he's quite happy for you to fall into haram by focusing on something else. So he comes and tells you, oh, this is sunnah, and this is sunnah, and this is sunnah, and this is sunnah. And so you keep adding and subtracting and adding and subtracting and changing. And you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you end up doing nothing. Like there's nothing consistent in your life. So it's very, very important you say, in my life, this is what I can actually do. So I'll just give an example, of myself. When I was in high school, praying duha. Okay, duha, 8 rak'ahs. Fantastic. Let's pray 8 rak'ahs of duha. And then when I started working at 19, like I actually couldn't do it. Like I can't actually do this. I can't, because like I need to sleep after Fajr and then I go to work and the beginning of the day is always the most busy time, right? So like I can't actually pray 8 rak'ahs of duha in the morning. So what did I do? I took it down to the bare minimum, right, of 2 rak'ahs of duha. And not only that, I actually did a minimum. Why? Not because I want to do minimum, because I want to be consistent. And then when I heard that the minimum afdal is 4 rak'ahs, I got to 4 rak'ahs. But again, when I do my duha, I intentionally do it as brief as possible. Like it's really brief as possible, just like minimum sunnahs. Why? Because I want to be consistent. I want to be 85 or 102, ya Rab, and I'm still praying 4 rakats duha every morning. I don't want to be the situation where I prayed 8 for a bit and then nothing. And then I started doing my memorizing and then I stopped. And then I started doing Shafi fiqh and then I stopped. And then I started doing hadith masters in from and then I stopped. And you're going round and round in circles. Like, I don't want to do that. Right? So with the sunnahs, you say, Alhamdulillah, these are great sunnahs, these are important. Right? But tell me which ones are like the most important or what you can actually do. If you can do all of them, do all of them. Fine. But make sure that you have a wird. Man laysa lahu wird wala irt fahuwa girt. Right? Super unbelievably important. Like, do you do this every day? Yes. Okay. What you do every day is the most important thing to hold on to. Right? Like, so again, I hate making, I always talk about marriage, but I think it's just a really good analogy, right? Marriage is a really good analogy, right? So, your wife and you just got married and she's living in her city, you're living in your city because it's not really working out yet. And you say, hey, let's just meet up, right? So then there's no system yet, right? There's no real system kind of working this thing out, like how are we going to do this? And then you start living together, and then you stop living together, and then you say, let's both go and work a lot so we can buy a house, and then we have more time together. And then you start your master's, and she starts her PhD, and it's like all over the place. Like you just continually like not doing one thing. Whereas if you just think of like one system, like it's quite a relationship takes time, right? Like, and you need to have this consistent thing. My cat, right? My cat Shin. He took like a month and a half to become friendly. And he's super friendly, but it's like he needs consistent, normal behavior from you so that he feels good. The same thing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need to be consistent. Like, this is what I do every single day. These are the du'as I say when I go to sleep. These are the du'as. This is what I do. This is what I don't do. Right? And I'm consistent. And it's not changing every 2 minutes. Right? So it's really important to have a focus on, am I doing the haram? No. Right? And I give another example. My friend, right, he would get up for tahajjud and he would do a minimum wudu. So then I told him, I said, Habibi, that's makruh. Like, you can't just do a minimum wudu. So you're getting up for tahajjud. He's trying to be a person of Allah, right? But he's actually doing something makruh. So had he just not made wudu, it would have been better. Like, I actually asked Sheikh Amjad, I said, Sheikh Amjad, is missing the 3 washings of the arm? Is it makruh min haythu salah or makruh min haythu hu? And he said, no, min haythu hu. Like, you're doing something offensive in itself. So it would actually be better not to make wudu, So you say, I don't want to do something haram and I don't want to do something makruh. So therefore, any sunnah that is makruh to leave, I'm going to do. Witr, I don't know, a bunch of prayers here and there, etc. And then what is in your life? You delete every single thing in your life that's worthless. Why did you click on that email? Like, you don't accept from yourself things like, oh, I clicked on that email when I didn't need to. I checked that, I opened that WhatsApp group, even though like, or I'm on a WhatsApp group that I don't need to be on, right? Like, so you have a system in life where I am doing the fard, the sunnah mu'akkada, I'm avoiding the makruh, and there's nothing in my life that's a waste of time, right? There's nothing like when I'm walking down the street, I'm doing salawat on the Prophet. I'm revising Quran. I have my phone open. I'm doing Quran. I'm doing work while I'm walking down the street. Like, there's no time in my life where you couldn't find me not doing an act of worship, right? But outwardly, you're not doing that much. You don't do that much. Like, you just avoid the makruh. Your Quran. Oh, should I do Surah Al-Kahf? Or should I review the surah that I'm about to forget and I may be sinful for doing? Can you see the difference? So the shaitan says, don't do Surah Al-Kahf. It's really important. Protection with the Dajjal. He's not interested in you doing quality, serious worship. He's interested in you continually doing entertaining, exciting worship. Oh, I've just memorized the 61st wudu, sunnah of wudu. It's not that exciting, right? Does that make sense? So my apologies, there's somebody vacuum cleaner right next to me. So I don't know if you can hear, but it's very loud for me.
It makes sense, Sheikh, and
right?
we cannot hear it.
Okay, fantastic. Right? So this is a really important thing, right? من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. Right? There is nothing, come and find me, I'm saying myself, but you have a standard. In my life, I do not accept downtime. Like there is nothing in my life that doesn't have an act of worship. Even like last night, for example, last night I was going to teach like I didn't have the car, so I'm just going to pause this. Just want to trying to share these things. I'm not trying to like show off like how I live my life or anything like that. I'm just trying to, you know, just trying to like share these kind of paradigms with you. Right? So washing under the beard then, right? This is something this is very important because the Malikis, they say it's obligatory. We also have a position in the school this is obligatory, right? It is the face by default. So yeah, washing under my beard, this is fear Allah, right? Be careful. Make sure you get underneath, right? تخليل شعر كثيف من لحية وعارض as opposed to شعر خفيف, that's obligatory anyway, right? وإن لم يخرج عن وجه وَخَارِجٍ عَنِ الْوَجْهِ, right? And hair, the beard that grows outside of the beard. So the beard that grows in the limits of the face and then extends out, that has to be washed. The outer side of it has to be washed. But let's say, for example, hair that grows past the edge of your jawbone, right? It's also sunnah to wash that. للاتباع في اللحية رواه الترمذي وصححه ويقاس بها غيرها بأن يدخل أصابعه من أسفل اللحية مثلا, for example, بعد تفريقها, right? He says وذكر العارض والخارج من زيادتي, I've added these things. وتخليل أصابع اليدين بالتشبيك, right? To go between your fingers, right? With wet hands. أصابع الرجلين من أسفلها بخنصر يده اليسرى, right? To specifically go from underneath, use your pinky to go from under the right foot of use your pinky from your left hand to go from underneath your foot and go between the little toe of your right foot and the next one. Then you work from right to left, right? مبتدئا بخنصر رجله اليمنى خاتما بخنصر اليسرى والأصل في ذلك خبر لقيط بن صبرة أسبغ الوضوء وخلل بين أصابع رواه الترمذي وغيره وصححه. Right, now what about the issue of the pinky then? Right, what's the proof for that? Right, that's basically that is basically no proof, right? So what you will find is that early scholars will nebulously mention things here and there. Sometimes it's based on a hadith that we're not familiar with. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's kind of like, well, that would in principle be a good idea. Like using your left hand would be better than your right hand because you're doing something that's to do with filth, right? Your feet. Starting with your right would make sense. Given that the pinky is small, so it's kind of more of a practical thing, right? They're saying it's a practical thing. So the ikhtiyar of Imam Nawawi is that it's not particularly recommended to use a pinky. It's just as an example, right? So the fact that it's small doesn't make it recommended in itself. Does that make sense? It's kind of a practical thing, right? But you will find situations where the ashab do this, and you can't just leave it like that because the ashab mentioned it, that it's recommended, and we don't really know why they did it, right? So we've mentioned before that with Imam Shafi, it's generally easy to find out why he says something, but it's not always the case, and nor is it always the case with it's not it's not always the case we know exactly why the ashab say things, right? Sometimes you're going to have some early book mention something, so many quotes that early book, right? And that early book is somebody huge, Al-Qaffal. We don't have the book. We don't know why he said that. The other person just quoting it, just saying it's recommended, and we don't really know why exactly, right? It does happen sometimes. And you find someone like Imam Nawawi saying, like just doing his ikhtiyar is not recommended, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. And again, it goes back to the idea of sunnah, like it's marginally better, so therefore it's sunnah, right? So there's a big difference. There's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ telling us, khalil, and do, Was it خلل بين الأصابع? That means between the fingers and toes. That's a command. The default is a command obligation. I'm making wudu now, and I'm having istihdar of the idea that Allah sent me a messenger, and He told me to do this, and this hadith is sahih, and I have to do that. Versus it being marginally recommended to use your pinky specifically. You know what I'm saying? So all of it is recommended, but it's not the same. والتثليث والتثنية والتثليث لخبر مسلم أنه صلى الله عليه وسلم توضأ ثلاثا ثلاثا رواه البخاري ثلاثة ثلاثا وروى البخاري أنه توضأ مرة مرة وتوضأ مرتين مرتين والأفضل التثليث في الغسل والمسح والتخليل والدلك. Right? So we say in everything, the school is all of these things. Doesn't matter what you're doing, it's always recommended to do three. And he says, وَالذِّكْرِ كَالتَّسْمِيَةِ. So you're saying it's sunnah to say that?
Sheikh,
Yes.
what does this part mean when he says مرة مرة and مرتين
And
مرتين?
once the Prophet made wudu, washing his limbs just once. And then another time he washed his limbs twice. Does that make sense?
It does. In the original text of the Lubab that we were reading,
Yeah.
he mentions وأما النفل فشيء واحد وهو التوضؤ مرتين مرتين. So why does he mention two here?
So he's basically so Muhammad is breaking like these things into three different levels. Like there is, so he says nafl. Nafl means ziyada. So basically, like there's the fard, and then there's ziyada, and then there's a sunnah. That's what he's kind of breaking it to. So I think he's going to put he puts it in one category. So making wudu, washing your arms, just twice is neither fard because it's more than the fard, nor is it sunnah because it's actually makruh to do that. So what do we call it? He calls it nafl, meaning it's in excess of the bare minimum. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So he's saying that the tasmiyah, you say it three times. You say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim three times. So he says in the حاشية كالتسمية مثال للذكر ودخل تحت الكاف الدعاء الآتي. والنية, you do the niyyah three times. فيسن تثليثها بخلافها في الصلاة. So you say Bismillah, apparently you do it three times. Wallahu a'lam. And he says here, here's the issue. This is a practical thing, is tathlith thalathan. So we know that doing more than three is makruh, right? So what do I do when I don't know how many times I've done it? Like if I do four, it's going to be makruh. And if I do two, it's going to be makruh. So I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So the answer is, al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shakk, right? So I say, have you washed your arm three times? I think so. I'm not, okay. يقينا, right? فيأخذ الشك باليقين, right? He says, ولا يقال, the objection should not be made, الأخذ بذلك ربما يلزم عليه زيادة رابعة وهي بدعة وترك سنة أسهل من اقتحام بدعة. Notice what I just said right now. Leaving a sunnah is more important than doing a bid'ah. لأن نقول إنما تكون بدعة إذا تيقن أنها رابعة. It's only a bid'ah if you do it more, right? So notice this concept here. This is just what I mentioned, right? This is the concept. جلب المصالح درء المفاسد أولى من جلب المصالح, right? And I just want to give you an example of that, right? There's this brother, he was like, oh, should I don't want to do this job because it's not it's kind of like there's less wara in doing this job, there's less scrupulousness. So I said, Habibi, for a man who doesn't have a job and isn't able to get married, it's a huge fitna. It's a huge fitna on multiple levels, right? Like being in a situation where, like, I can't get married physically. B, I'm not a man. Like, it's a huge, huge fitna in your life. Like, I'm not able to put bread on my own table. It's a huge fitna. So it's very, very important to have, to doing the sunnah. Like, I have a 9 to 5 I can put food on my table. I can do this. I can do that. It's a huge thing as opposed to doing bid'ah, doing lots of extra sunnahs that are wrong. Go ahead, Ammar.
We're gonna ask as a practical point, like I'm familiar with the sort of debate surrounding this, but in terms of the fact that usually we make wudu in our bathrooms now, like with respect to, of course, the basmala comes up, but like even just with the adhkar, um, is the idea of like separating the toilet area from the sink area a thing that I don't know how to phrase the question, but
Like, is it, yeah, to do, so certainly, like if you're in the shower and there's a shower curtain or if there's a shower, like a thing that you close, you're not in the bathroom anymore, right? So that's certainly the case. So otherwise, I've heard some people say that if you put the toilet seat down, it's not considered al-khala, it's not considered the place where you relieve yourself. But I don't know if that's true or not. Allahu alam. So personally, that's what I do. Like when I do, I will step out of the bathroom, say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, step in, right? And why particularly do I do that? Not actually because it's sunnah, because it's actually wajib in the Hanbali school. So I'm doing it because like, oh, hang on a minute, my wudu might not be valid in the Hanbali school, right? Which is more important than doing an extra sunnah here and there, right? So step out of the bathroom, say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, step in, right? It's a bit tricky in a public bathroom when you have, let's say, urinals behind you, you know? It's like, am I in the bathroom or not? So I'm not in the toilet stool, but there's a urinal behind me. So like, does that like or like to my right or to my left? Like, am I in that place or not? It's a bit kind of tricky, you know?
yeah. No,
So,
I had
here's a question. What should I do then? Like, should I? So now I'm in a situation where I can't. Let's say, for example, I am I'm making wudu in the airplane. Okay. So now you leave. There's like two people behind you, right? They're like, dude, why don't you get out and get back in again? Like, what's your problem? Like, can you get on with it? Right? You're already taking time. So you left. There's gonna be more mafsada than not, right? So like, So now I'm not gonna say Bismillah aloud. I'll just do it in my heart. That's it. You know, because there's even if I put the toilet seat down, it's like, well, there's a possibility that this doesn't count as a toilet. And it's a possibility that it's wajib, that Allah does not recognize my wudu if I don't say Bismillah. There's also a possibility that this is a bathroom and I'm doing something haram. So I prefer to avoid the haram than do something that's recommended slash wajib, you know?
yeah. No, that's how I've been trying to deal with it as well. I just the question had come to my mind regarding the adhkar because like the basmala is one thing, but yeah, of course it's in that sense.
Yeah, so the adhkar, same thing, don't say them in the bathroom, yeah. Allah. And so here's another thing then with the amal, right? We're talking about I don't accept not doing things. Who said you don't have to do the dhikr in your heart, right? You know? So here's these two people. One person, he lives life, he just does the minimum, right? So he just does like basic fard, really basic sunnahs, right? And the other person, he does the same thing, but his whole life is dhikr, like non-stop. When he's in the bathroom, he's making dhikr in his heart. When he's going to sleep, he's making dhikr. When he wakes up, it's dhikr. His whole life is dhikr, right? You say, hey, did you do a khatam this month? Like, oh, not really. I tried to, didn't really have much time. What happened? Have you memorized the Quran? Like, no, not really. You know this hadith? Like, no, not really. Do you know your fard ayn? Yeah, I know my fard ayn. So you know your fard ayn. You This month he could say, oh, Wallahi al-Azim, I did not do something haram this month, right? Not inwardly or outwardly, right? Inwardly and outwardly. So there's no haram, there's no makruh, and this person is just always doing dhikr, right? Fantastic. Okay. And then here's the question, who stopped you making dhikr in the bathroom? You know? Who stopped you making dhikr when you're trying to find your keys or go into the car? Or, you know? And even if you're focused on something else, right? Like it's the only reason we can't do dhikr while we're doing something that's mentally challenging is because of our intense ghafla, right? But it's almost like, if I say, when you were doing your exam, were you aware that you had a pen in your hand? So yeah. Or that you were sitting, so yeah. Or that you were in a room, yeah. Okay, that's called dhikr. Dhikr is like I'm just cognizant of where I am in existence, right? And so we are so ghafil that we can't do those things, right? That's why in Jannah, people will be Like you just like do dhikr without any effort, right? But there are people who can do dhikr without any effort, right? So if you're that situation where you don't do the makruh, don't do the haram, and your whole life is dhikr, like fantastic. I mean, you don't really care what you do, right? But the problem is the opposite. Is like, oh, I'm doing this and I went on Umrah. Okay, well, what did you see when you went on Umrah? And what did you say to somebody when you went on Umrah? And what money did you go with at Umrah? And oh, I'm doing Hashid Sharqawi, fantastic. But you have bad akhlaq and you actually you hurt people's feelings on a regular basis. And I don't know, you just did this haram and that haram. And it's like, there's a lot of haram in your life. So you're trying to compensate in your life with lots of extra really good things and labeling yourself as religious when you're not actually religious because you regularly do the haram, right? So this is the kind of point they're trying to make. Okay. So he says, anyway, so if you're not sure, you go an extra, right? So he says, وَقَدْ يَحْرُمُ التَّثْلِيث كَأَنْ ضَاقَ الْوَقْت. You don't have time, so you did an extra, be haram. Because you're supposed to do bare minimum. بحيث لو ثلث لم يدرك الصلاة كاملة, right? So this is exactly the mentality you're talking about. Why did you leave the sunnah for Eid the other day? You didn't go to the masjid. Why? Same reason. If I did this sunnah, I couldn't do that wajib. Okay, thank you very much. That's good. As opposed to why did you not do the sunnah? You have no reason. If you don't have a more important sunnah or a wajib, right, that stopped you doing that sunnah, then why didn't you do it? Right? That's the problem, right? لم يدرك الصلاة كاملة فيه أو احتاج لمائه لعطش محترم, right? Some living being that deserves to stay alive. You can't do that now. Okay. Okay, خير. So he says والتيامن في أعضاء الوضوء كذا في كل. So anyway, so as we mentioned before, the zahir of the text and the hashia is that it's sunnah to do every dua 3 times. So you're going to say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, etc. That's the zahir, Allahu a'lam. والذكر كالتسمية. And the dua at the end of the prayer, dua as well, right? والتيامن في أعضاء الوضوء كذا في كل ما هو من باب التكريم كغسل كغسل ولبس ثوب وفعل وفعل, is that what it says? And doing things.
It's a noon.
Oh, لبسي نعل, جزاكم الله خير. ولبسي نعل, right? Putting shoes on. وخف وسروال, right? وسراويل. ودخول مسجد واليسار ضد ذلك مت كالمخطأ المخاط is المخطط, I think it is. I can't see what it is here. So click, so when you do click their nose.
I have كامتخاط.
كامتخاط, right? Wiping, cleaning your nose. Istinja, right? Etc. وخرج من وخروج من مسجد لأنه صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يجب التيامن في تنعله, etc. Right, and so some of our scholars have mentioned that, or some of my teachers have mentioned that whenever you leave your house, always leave your house with the right foot. Why? Because you're always going to go to something good, right? So it's like leaving your house is like entering the masjid. I'm going to work today. I'm going to do something. I'm going to find out what's wrong with my car. I'm going to do something good, right? So you're not wasting, you're going to the good, right? So leave with your right foot. كان يجب كان يحب التيامن في تنعله وترجله وطهوره وشأنه كله, رواه الشيخان. وروى أبو داود بإسناد صحيح. And again, where is he getting that from? Probably from Imam Nawawi or others, or Ibn Hajar or something like that. And عائشة قالت كانت يد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اليمنى لطهوره وطعامه وكانت اليسرى لخلائه وما كان من أذى من filth and that kind of thing. أذى can mean najasa or just filth in general. إلا الكفين أول الوضوء والخدين والأذنين وجانبي الرأس لغير نحو أقطع فيطهران معا لأنه أهون. Right? وأما الأقطع, somebody who has his hand cut off, كمن خلق بيد واحدة فيسن له التيامن مطلقا حيث فيسن له التيامن مطلقا. أم، وأما نحو أقطع كمن خلق بيد واحدة فيسن له التيامن مطلقا. It's still recommended, right? As much as able, right? حيث يسن التيامن وحيث يسن التيامن يكره التياسر. Notice, so it's not always the case that leaving every makruh is every single sunnah is makruh, but here it is. So I don't want to do that, right? وذكر جانب رأس ونحوه, I don't know if there's something else, من زيادته, right? The two sides of the head. والتوجيه للقبلة في وضوئه لأنه أشرف الجهات, right? فإن that's a hadith, right? إن لكل شيء سيد والسيد الجهات أو القبلة, something like that. It's in طبراني or Abu Ya'la or something like that. الله أعلم. إن اشتهت عليه فالقياس ندب التحري, right? It's going to be recommended, right? So if you're not sure, it's going to be recommended to try and find out where the qibla is. والجلوس بمحل لا يناله فيه رشاش, right? You're not going to get spread water on you. The water's not going to splash back at you. ووضع الإناء الواسع عن يمينه ليسهل الاغتراف منه ويضع الضيق كالإبريق كالجاج عن يساره ليسهل الأخذ الماء منه بيمينه. So the small container to your left so that you can pick it up with your right. Yeah, that's probably what it is, to pour. Yeah. That's probably what it is. وترك الاستعانة في الصب عليه لأنها ترف لا يليق بالمتعبد فهي خلاف الأولى. وأما الاستعانة في غسل الأعضاء فمكروه وفي إحضار الماء لا بأس بها, right? ولا يقال إنها خلاف الأولى لثبوتها عنه صلى الله عليه وسلم في مواطن كثيرة, right? So you have three levels then, right? You've got, can you please get me some water to make wudu? Fine. So then Jawad goes all the way down to the river, which is like half a mile, and comes back. It's like, Freed, like, why did you do that? Isn't that like a bit decadent? Doesn't really fit wudu? It's like, no, it's fine. It's okay. So Jawad happened to be going anyway, or he's whatever, free or something like that. Right? That's okay. So if somebody else went and got the water for you, that's okay. That's not considered decadent, right? في الصب عليه لأنها ترف, right? So the taraf that doesn't go with the spirit of wudu, right? So having somebody else pour for you, right? So وأما الاستعانة في غسل الأعضاء فمكروهة. So ترك الاستعانة في الصب. So now there's two things. So now there's pouring. Bro, can you just pour for me while I'm washing my arms? Okay, that is khilaf al-awla, right? As opposed to, can you wash my arm? Hold my arm out. Jawad, wash my arm. I'm your sheikh. Come and kiss my hands and wash my arm for me. It's like, bro, you're be humble and make wudu properly. You know, that's not humble, right? Illa li'udhrin, it's actually quite difficult. I'm not used to, like, I'm not very good. I'm camping. I'm not very good at making wudu without somebody like helping me. I'm going to waste a lot of water, right? I'm not used to doing this, so that's fine. ولا بأس بالاستعانة مطلقا بل قد يجب ولو بأجرة المثل الفاضلة عن قضاء دينه وعن كفاية مؤنه يومه وليلته, right? So now the only way that I can make wudu is to pay Jawad. So I say, how much is Jawad charging me? He's charging normal fee for that kind of thing? How much would it cost in the Bay Area in California to hire somebody to help you do things like this? So that's what he's paying, right? This is normal kind of, let's say, elderly home thing that if you paid somebody to come to your house and help you get dressed, those kind of things, help you wash, that's what you would pay them. Okay, so he's charging me this same amount for the 5 minutes of helping me, right? This it's normal fee. Ujratul mithl, number one. Number two, I don't have debts. Here we say what kind of debts though, right? So he says عن قضاء دينه ضعيف والمعتمد عدم الاشتراط ذلك هنا وفي زكاة الفطر بل الشرط الفاضل عن مؤنته ها. So what I remember that the ikhtilaf between Ibn Hajar and Ramli is the issue of is on zakat al-fitr. Do we consider your long-term debts or do you your current debts? Not debts, period. So he's saying, Sharqawi, he's saying when it says here that is it so I have to pay Jawad to come and help me make wudu because I couldn't do it otherwise. I'm paying him the normal fee and it's fadil an qada'i daynihi. It has to be in excess of my current debts, of my debts. Now, for what I remember, the debate between Ibn Hajar and Ramli is it current debts or is it any debts? Right? And so the same thing with zakat al-fitr. When you say you have enough to do these things, is it enough to support your family for today and pay your debts, or is it your long-term debts as well? Right? Not that so here it says ضعيف والمعتمد عدم اشتراط ذلك هنا وفي زكاة الفطر بل الشرط الفضل عن مؤنة مامونه, that having enough the mu'na, having enough nafaqa to pay for those you have to support for the next 24-hour period. وما يبقى له في الفطر كما في شرح ميم راء, right? And Allahu A'lam. Just give me 1 second. I don't want to, I know it's getting late for you guys, like past midnight. Just want to find one thing. So, one key way of checking these things, number one, Bushra Kareem would be a good place to look here, right? Because it's going to have exactly this mas'ala. But another way to do this is whenever you see something ascribed to Ibn Hajar, like Ibn Ramli says this, Ibn Hajar says this, that means it's a difference of agreement, right? And so there's this cool book. Instead of me picking up the Tuhfa or the Nihaya, I can just read Fath al-Ali. So Fath al-Ali, this is one of the Hadara about 200 years ago, put a book comparing the positions of Ibn Hajar al-Ramli. And then Sheikh Hassan Hito's daughter, Dr. Shifa Hito, she did a tahqiq of it, and it's really, really, really good. So you're going to have a lot of tahqiq of the masail here, right? So here I'm going to look, and so it's going to be an issue that's going to come up in Hajj. Do I have to go on Hajj if I have debts? Zakat al-Fitr. Do I have enough money to pay Zakat al-Fitr given I have debts? And then here as well. So I'm actually going to start looking in Fitr because it's more likely to come up there. Zakat al-Fitr. From what I remember, the debate is not whether it's zakat. Okay, here 871. So this Jawad, no jokes. This is a book that you need to buy though. It is very important. 871.
This one's already on the list. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. 871. Okay, so here it says. No, what is this? 871. 871. Can I not read? 871. Is it 781 maybe? Yeah, sorry, I got the wrong one. Oh, it's my 6 and 7, my 7 and 8 is still off. Okay, so anyway, so it says in Zakat al-Fitr, okay, this is in Fath al-Ali, ويمنع هل يمنع الدين وجوب الزكاة يشترط في زكاة الفطر أن يكون فاضلا عن دينه ولو مؤجلا عند ابن حجر, right? So Ibn Hajar says if your long-term debts, Like, do you have long-term debts? So yes. Okay. So you don't have to pay zakat then. Zakat al-fitr, خلاص. وعند ابن حجر لا يشترط. So عند محمد رملي لا يشترط. Okay. So now he says, so Zakaria Ansari, he says in his manhaj, he says وعن دينه ولو مؤجلا وإن رضي صاحبه بالتأخير. Right? So you have debts. You told the guy, hey, do you mind if I pay back another time? He says, fine, don't worry about it. So not a problem. Okay. And so just important thing to note, when we say debts in the Shafi school, any debt that is a pure debt is going to be is immediate. Okay. As opposed to a debt that's a result of a sale. So a debt that's a result of a sale, for example, I buy a car from Jawad, I say, hey, can I pay you by next year? So it's fine, don't worry about it. Right? So that's what we mean by a debt that is mu'ajjal. Right? Otherwise, every debt is hal. Every debt is due now. Like even if you lent me a $10,000 and said pay me back in a year, it's due now because you could be claimed now. Okay. So then he's going through basically. So Zakaria Ansari says that he mentions other positions. I just want to see what Ibn Hajar. I'm going to skip forward. So she's kind of going through the history of the whole discussion. Okay, so here this is what Imam Ramli says. Okay, Imam Ramli says, he says ولا يشترط كونها فاضلة عن دينه ولو لآدمي كما رجحه في الشرح الصغير. So this is شرح الصغير. This is Imam Rafi'i's شرح الصغير. Okay, on the Wajiz. So it's not not Al-Aziz, another one. Okay. وقال في الأنوار. So what's happening here is it's uh, it's either not mentioned, which would be very, very odd in Al-Aziz, right? And it's not mentioned in the Majmu', which would be very strange. And it's only mentioned Sharh al-Saghir, it's odd. Or Imam Rafi'i as a mujtahid in the school, not Imam Rafi'i, Imam Ramli, Shamsuddin Ramli as a mujtahid in the school, is looking and saying this position is stronger than the other positions. This position A exists by somebody like Rafi'i, right? And B is in keeping with everything else. وقال في الأنوار. Anwar is a book that comes after by Ardabili, right? He comes after Imam after these people. He says إنه القياس is correct. واقتضاه كلام الشافعي والأصحاب, right? So these people are again working as أصحاب الترجيح. They're saying Imam Nawawi said this, Imam so-and-so said this, but here this is correct. Okay, so anyway, so then he says لأن الدين لا يمنع زكاة أصلا, does it? Right? A debt does not stop you from paying zakat. ولا يمنع إيجاب نفقة الزوج والقريب. If you're in debt, that doesn't stop you from having to pay to support your wife, etc. فلا يمنع إيجاب الفطرة التابعة لها. Right? And so just as a debt does not stop you from having to support your wife, it will not stop you from having to pay the thing that is a result of you having to support your wife, which is zakat al-fitr. Right? Now, so here, this is really interesting, right? So what that means then, it means that a Rafi'i is going that a Ramli is going against Imam Nawawi. So that means if Ramli is going against Imam Nawawi, then it means on some aspects, Ramli is on the level of Nawawi. Otherwise, how could he go against him? You know what I'm saying? And if Nawawi can take on the ashab on certain levels, that means he's kind of on the level. What does that mean then? It means ijtihad has never ended. There was no point where you come along and say, by the fact that he said it, it makes it true. That actually never happened. Does that make sense? Because this is ajib. Look, Romney's saying this, and now he's going to quote the مجموع. So this is in the مجموع. واعلم أن الدين الآدمي يمنع وجوب الفطر بالاتفاق. He says بالاتفاق. Right? So what's happening is Ramli is actually going against Imam Nawawi, which is ajib, right? Based on that, but he's not doing it independently. Obviously, he's some support. He has Rafi'i, at least one opinion of Rafi'i saying that, right? And he has Al-Isnawi before him saying the similar thing. No, others people saying that as well. Allahu alam. And it's probably his father's opinion. So often Ramli's positions are Shihabuddin's opinion, right? So for Ibn Hajar, mutlaqan the dain, which is dain al-hal and dain al-mu'ajjal. So I was mistaken. For Ramli, mutlaqan the dain does not do anything. Right? So here when he says da'if, Sharqawi here is a Ramliist, right? Because they're all Egyptians, they're like Ramli. So he says here da'if. This is the position of. So he says والمعتمد أي عند الرملي عدم اشتراط ذلك هنا وفي زكاة الفطر بل الشرط etc. كما في شرح ميمرا, right? So Sharqawi is going to be a commentator slash always going to rely on Ramli, right? So we're going to say the position of Ibn Hajar is no. I have debts, so do I have to pay Jawad the normal salary or the normal amount that I have to pay somebody to do this kind of thing to help me make wudu, or am I just excused? So if I have debts according to Ramli, yes, you do. If I have debts according to Ibn Hajar, no, you do not. You're not obliged to do that. عن قضاء دينه وعن كفاية مؤنه يومه وليله وسائر ما يبقى له في الحج فإن لم يجد صلى وأعاده, right? He can't find somebody, he can't find that. You don't have the ability, then you pray and then you repeat it later on if you're able. وتعبيري بالعذر أعم من تعبير بالضر harm. So it's got to be some kind of excuse, right? So we mentioned, oh, I'm going to pour if you don't hold the cup for me or hold the bottle for me, it's going to pour everywhere. So, I have some kind of excuse. من تعبيره بالضر و something. وإذا استعان and something here, got
بالضرورة.
بالضرورة. تعبير بالضرورة. I thought it said بالضرورة. And then he says وإذا استعان right, then you have so if you're going to have somebody, then you start with the left, right? We'll talk about this inshallah next week. So inshallah ta'ala we'll get to the matan next week. Inshallah ya Rab. So good news, we are how many pages in? About a tenth of the way through this book. So inshallah 5%, inshallah. But I think we've learned quite a lot of things here and there, inshallah. It's not a waste of time. I hope there's not too many tangents and we're not spending too much time with the hashia. So inshallah it's useful, inshallah ta'ala. Alhamdulillah. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Here we go in a second. Oh, there we go. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Okay, assalamu alaikum.
جزاك الله خير. وعليكم السلام.